Welcome to the Megillah Project.
One story, many angles.
Come learn with us.
I have a starting point that came from a teacher I had when I was in seminary, which I didn't finish. So I can't tell you the end of this because I didn't finish seminary, but I was there for 3 years out of a 5-year sentence. And I'll never forget his Esther lesson. And it began with the words, he said, "Really, gentlemen, Esther is a very dirty book." And that's where our title today comes from. Esther is a very dirty book. And he said, what does that mean to say that about a book of the Bible, that it's a very dirty book? And he said, well, the word dirty can have several different meanings. Dirty can mean like morally, like you say, well, that was a dirty thing to do. And you mean, bad, mean, unethical. Or dirty can be in politics, like, it speaks of dirty politics and tricks and all that are done. Or dirty can mean referring to sex, because as we know, everybody knows that sex is dirty. So we use the word dirty there. What a world. So when I use the word about Esther and I say it's a very dirty book, I mean all three of those. It's everything. There's unethical stuff, there's wretched politics, and there's lots of sex. And most of us don't think about the sex that much because Esther is one of those books of the Bible that people usually first learn as children, because it's associated with this fun holiday with the masks and the noise. Your kids are allowed to make noise in the synagogue. I mean, this is like great. It doesn't get any better than that. And because it has this very special meaning, especially for kids, and you get to wear costumes and have fun with it. We usually don't focus on the sexual part, but you just try to stop me from focusing on the sexual part. I mean, you got the wrong guy. So we'll go there. We'll see where that takes us. So a few introductory remarks about Esther. And here we can talk for a change about the whole book of Esther, because it's short enough that you can do that. Here are some of the curious things about Esther. First of all, it's not in the Dead Sea Scrolls. As you may know, there's portions of at least every book of the Hebrew Bible were found in the caves of Qumran in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and those are our oldest manuscripts of the Bible. The problem is when you sit in a cave for 2,000 years, it gets kind of ugly. So if you've ever seen scrolls, or even photographs of scrolls, they're in pretty wretched shape. Only the book of Isaiah is complete. And that's the only one of the 39 books of the Hebrew Bible that's complete. All the others are in bad shape. The funny thing, though, about Esther, it's this famous thing, it's the only one of the books of the Hebrew Bible that's just not there at all. Now, it could be that maybe the corner where they put the Esther scroll, got wet, because some of them are damaged by humidity. It could have been eaten by worms, because some of them are partly eaten by worms. It could have oxidized. Like if you've ever seen pictures of the temple scroll, when it was first rolled up, when they got it, it looks like one of those ice cream cones that come already made and with chocolate fudge type stuff on top. And it looked like that because the whole top, which was exposed, was gradually oxidizing. Just contact with the air, because it'll do that after 2,000 years. And so we've lost the upper third of the temple scroll. When you open it up, you just see from here down. And so it could be that there was an Esther, and Esther just had the bad luck to get oxidized. Now, I've given you all those possibilities. I don't believe any of them. I think they just didn't have Esther among their Dead Sea Scrolls. And then you have to ask, well, why would the Dead Sea Scroll community, these Essenes, scribes, why would they not include Esther? Well, there's good possibilities. For one thing, the other famous thing about the book of Esther is that there's no mention of God in the book of Esther. And that's troubling to some people. The other book that doesn't have, God is a Song of Songs. But Esther was always kind of famous for that because, the Jews get saved and everything. And, in Egypt, when the Jews need to get saved, there's miracles and splitting seas and fire from the sky and frogs and death and, but no, in the story of Esther, as we'll see, it is a rather more earthly set of means that saved the Jews. So it could be they just plain didn't like it. if you look in the Greek text of Esther, God is mentioned. And so which is it? Is it that the Hebrew manuscript that we have is the original, and in the Greek they added God in? Or is it that the Greek is translating a Hebrew original that had God in it, and the Hebrew manuscripts took God out? Come on, do you really picture a Jewish scribe taking God out everywhere it appeared? That seems pretty unlikely. So in this case, I think it's pretty clear that the original text is the one that doesn't have God, and the guys who put in God, it's because they were not really very comfortable with that there was no God in a book of the Bible. In Midrash, there are stories that try to work God in. They have, when Queen Esther, when she is made the queen, which we'll tell you later how that happens. I'm doing a spoiler here. She's going to marry the king, and the rabbis didn't like the idea that she was having sex and marriage with this Persian guy, So they made it that she never actually had sex with Ahasuerus, but at night an angel would come, and the angel would deceive Ahasuerus into thinking he was having sex with Esther, but actually it was with an angel. Is that cool? His noblemen come to him the next day and say, "How was it?" He says, "Divine." It's really, you may hold up your laugh out loud signs now. So already you've got a couple of things that are unusual about this book, make it atypical among biblical books. And the other thing is about these names and all, and the unlikelihood of it. Of course, there's nothing about this in any Persian records or anything. Now, I know there's nothing about the Exodus and the Egyptian records, but I still think the Exodus was historical. But on this one, most of us are pretty much persuaded that this is not an actual history. It's rather a story that was written with a lot of great lessons to it. So it's still fine and good and belongs to the Bible. That's okay, but not that it's history. It's a little suspicious because remember, one of the main goddesses in that area is Ishtar. And one of the main gods, who was the chief god of Babylon, was Marduk. Marduk, Ishtar, Mordecai, Esther makes a person stop and think. Now you might say, but that doesn't prove anything. There are Jewish girls in America named Mary. You can get names that come from other religions. You say, yeah, but would you be named after a foreign god or goddess? And actually one of the most popular names of women in Israel now is Anat, and Anat was a pagan goddess. So people do that, but still it's curious that it's Mordecai and Esther. And then just the unlikelihood of it and the way it rolls out. So I think that means we have to address the story. It's the story where the evil prime minister of Persia, the Persian Empire, Jafar, his name's Haman. Haman, is going to try to destroy all the Jews. And the story is that he wanted everybody to bow down to him, but there was this one guy who wouldn't bow down to him, and it's Mordecai. And Mordecai won't do that because as a Jew, he doesn't bow down to other human beings. And Haman does, what any normal person would do under the circumstances. He decides he needs to kill Mordecai's entire ethnic group, everybody from which he comes. That's what you and I would do. If an Italian offends you, you go and you get mad at all the Italians. It's a little unfair, but Haman is not known for, generosity. So Haman decides he's going to kill all the Jews. And when you learn about this story in school, you find out that it takes place in Shushan, which presumably is Susa, the capital city of the Persian Empire. But so people confuse it and they misunderstand it because we don't want to tell the kids what's really going on there. You think that it's just the Jews of Shushan who are in trouble, but that's not what Haman's doing. It says he's going after all the Jews in the Persian Empire, but all the Jews in the world are in the Persian Empire. the Persian Empire, until the moment that Alexander the Great conquered it, covered everything from, they defeated Egypt in the south, and everything all the way over to what is now Turkey, meaning right up to the Greek border on the west, and everything to the western portion of India on the east. So it's everything, let's say, part of India, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Syria, Jordan, Israel, Lebanon, Egypt, all of that is in the Persian Empire. And presumably, unless some Jews slipped out and ran off to the Persian islands for a vacation on Santorini, all the Jews in the world are in the Persian Empire. So you should understand that the book of Esther is a genocide story. It is arguably the first genocide story for the Jews, because the Egyptians never tried to kill all the Jews. They want them as slaves. They want to kill them. So it's a far worse and more serious thing than you'd imagine. Now, people who read the book and studied it, especially as adults, they know this, but most of us first learn it as children, and we just don't picture it as being as serious and horrible as it is. It's a very dirty book. And so here we have a genocide story. And then it opens, though, with this beauty contest story. And I like good literature that kind of bounces around different genres and issues happening, and the local and the global all at the same time. So this King Ahasuerus, who rules all these provinces that cover all of the known world up to Europe, he has a wife named Vashti. And he has this big party for all of the heads of all of his provinces, and he wants to show off the beauty of his wife Vashti. You know the story. He invites Vashti to come to be there at the party and show herself off to everybody. And Vashti says, no, I'm not coming. And the king gets very upset about this. And he goes to all of his advisors. And then, what should we make of this? And his advice saying, it's a terrible thing. Because if the queen doesn't have to come when her husband tells her to come, then like all the women in the Persian Empire will think they can just not come when their husbands tell them to. This is anarchy. We're not supposed to use that word now. This is a very bad thing. This is bad for the kingdom. So they tell him that they're going to have to de-queen Vashti. So he's going to get rid of her, and that's where they get that famous song, I'm going to Vashti queen right out of my hair. And he, I didn't write that one either. And so they're very smart people though in Persia, because almost immediately they noticed they didn't have a queen anymore, so they needed to find a new one. Now you understand, he has a harem. He's got lots of women. It's only a question of who's going to be like, numera una among the many spouses and girlfriends and concubines of the king. And so this man Mordecai, who started the whole problem by not bowing down to Haman, now talks to his cousin, his niece, always, and and I know we're thinking other things, but anyway, he has cousin Esther, and it says her name was originally Hadassah, but she changed it for professional reasons to Esther. And it could be, by the way, that that's the thing of why she has a name of a local goddess there, that it's a throne name. Just like, David's name probably wasn't David, it was probably Elhanan. Solomon's name wasn't Solomon, it was Yedidiah, Jedediah. A lot of the kings of Israel, like modern popes and like kings of England, choose a name when they come to the throne. Remember, did you all see the king's speech? There's Bertie, right? Prince Albert, when he became king, this is Queen Elizabeth's father, he made himself King George. His name wasn't George, his name was Albert. But I was like, George, and this was like that. It could be that because she makes it to the throne, she gets a throne name. I don't know. Or it could be just, her mom and dad always liked that name. She was named after great grandma Essie, who had died. Something like that. So he tells Esther to go enter this contest for who's going to be the new bride of King Ahasuerus. Now, Esther, like Moses at the burning bush, declines to do it. either she's afraid or it's not what she wants out of life, or she doesn't want to go do it. And so she tells Mordecai, no, I can't go. I won't do this. But he tells her, listen, this guy Haman has declared this thing that all the Jews are going to get killed on the 15th of Adar, and that's sort of coming up on the calendar. And so you've got to do this. You can someday save the Jews. And she says, no. And then Mordecai, though, gives this answer to her that's very important. I will quote it entirely. He says to Esther, if you hold your peace at this time, enlargement and deliverance will arise for the Jews from some other place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows if you have come to the monarchy for just such a time as this? So he says, oh, you think you're going to be safe because you're in the throne room there? You'll die, and all the other Jews will get saved from some other way. And she goes, oh, okay, in that case, I'll go. It's a very persuasive argument, like, you're going to die. So she's going to go. But you have to understand that she needed arm twisting to make her go. Now, how is it that she won and gets to be in this position then? So she goes and enters the Miss Persia pageant, and it wasn't quite the way we picture it in terms of beauty pageants today. So when they do it in synagogues now, they have all the little girls dress up. Most of them choose to be like Queen Esther, and they wear their pretty outfits and little crowns and lipstick, and it's a beauty pageant. And that's not what it was, right? So we're picturing it like American beauty pageants where they all wear bathing suits and high heels. So Esther's going to enter, but it's not a beauty contest. It says what they do. There's the king's house, which is the palace. And next to that, they build the women's house, the Beit HaNashim, the women's house. And all of these beautiful young women from all over the Persian Empire, they find the best ones, they find all these beautiful, and they put them in the women's house. And each night, a different one of them goes and spends the night with the king. Not in a bathing suit and high heels, And she spends the night with the king. And then after he spends a night with each of them, the one that he'll keep calling back, that's the one who's going to be the winner and be the queen. So that ain't how they told it to me in Sunday school. But if you look in the text, that's how it happens. And I don't know what Esther knew that all those other women in Persia didn't know, but she kept getting called back, What can I say? Jewish women are great. I don't know. I'm kidding. Anyway, so we kind of leave the sexy part out when we teach it to the kids because, So she is married to Ahasuerus and is made the prime wife of the harem, which is to say the queen of the empire. And now the time comes when Haman's edict is about to arrive. And what Haman does is he gets the king to sign this edict, allowing for the killing of Jews all over his empire, which means basically the genocide of the Jews. And the way Haman does it is he says to the king, and these lines are really important. He says, there is a people dispersed and spread out in your kingdom, and their laws that they follow are not the laws of the king. And if you will put them into my hand to do, I will turn over, I forgot what it was, 10,000 talents of silver into the treasury. It is the classic anti-Semitic model. There are these people, they're different, they're spread out, so vulnerable, and it's in your financial interest to get rid of them. Those sentences will never go away. They could put that like up on the hall of the ADL when you walk in, And so the king signs off on this. And you notice he never says the word Jew to the king. He says, yeah, it doesn't matter. Some people, don't worry about it. They're different. And the king signs off. And the reason that matters is in the Persian Empire, and this is really true, once the king has signed off on something, he himself can't undo it. That's the law forever. And you can see that there are other legal systems where they had things like that. And the idea of doing that is to make it very hard to have a king's decisions undone just by the next king. And so they make it that even he can't undo it. Once you make a law, that's the law, done. And thus a king's word is his word forever. So now the Jews are in big trouble. So Mordecai then this is when he goes to Esther and says, you got to go save the Jews. And she says no. And he says, if you hold your peace, we'll get saved from some other place. And people make a big deal of that from some other place thing because God isn't mentioned anywhere in the book. So when he says from some other place, that's about the best you can come to as an example of, that it's God. And you may know that in Hebrew, sometimes that word for place, makom, is used as a word for God. It's one of the many terms used for God in rabbinic literature, not in the Bible. But the rabbis, of course, in reading the book of Esther would read that back in because it's the word makom, which usually in the English we translate it when we want it to mean God, we call God the omnipresent. But makom doesn't mean omnipresent. It means precisely not omni, just present. But that's what he what he says, and people grasp onto that because we want some God in this book already. So how is she going to save the Jews? She puts on her best outfit. She asks that all the other Jews fast and pray for her. And she goes into the king's chamber. Now, this is a problem because she's just informed Mordecai that nobody's allowed to step into the presence of the king unless you're invited. She says, and he hasn't invited her in the last 30 days. So if you go in uninvited, you're executed unless he extends his scepter to you and forgives you for that. So she takes her life into her hands now to save the Jews and goes into the king's presence uninvited. So you see what's happening in the story. It is a reverse on Vashti. That's been set up as a background here. Vashti wouldn't go when she was summoned. Esther is going in when she wasn't summoned. You're supposed to get that. So she's the polar opposite. And Ahasuerus extends the golden scepter to her. And yes, okay, I forgive you for committing this terrible sin of coming to see me. And he says, Esther, you risked your life to come in here. Why would you do that? And Esther says, to invite you to a party. And because apparently she was originally from LA, from the Valley, before she moved to Persia. And she says, to invite you to a party. And she invites him, and she says, oh, and bring Haman. So she invites just the king and the prime minister to come to her rooms for a private banquet. And says, Haman is very proud. He's excited that the queen's inviting just her husband and me. This is great. And he goes to the party. And at the party, Ahasuerus, drinking, good mood, says, Esther, what do you ask of me? You invited me. There's something you want. Ask me anything up to half my kingdom. Now, let me explain something about Near East bargaining, because people misunderstand this. When a king says, I'll give you anything up to half of my kingdom, he is not going to give Esther half of the Persian Empire if she asks for it. That's just an expression that we use. It's like in the story of where Abraham is buying the cave of Machpelah to bury his wife Sarah, and he says, name your price and I'll pay it. And the guy, the Hittite who's selling the cave to him says, no, I've given you the cave. It's yours for free. And Abraham says, no, I must pay for it. And the Hittite says, well, a cave worth, a couple of hundred shekels. What's that between you and me? Well, a couple hundred shekels is a lot of money. So the point is, neither one of them meant what he was saying. And any of you who've ever spent any time in the Middle East and been to the Shuk in Jerusalem or anywhere, that's what you do. That's how you, but you don't really mean it. And when the king says, I'll give you half my kingdom, he doesn't really mean it. That's just how you talk in the Near East. And if any of you are going to go back and visit, if someday we get to do that again, you should know this so you can, it's a game we play. So what is it Esther's going to ask of him? She says, I asked only one thing. I asked you for my life. And he says, why your life? And she says, well, there's someone trying to kill me and all of my people. And Ahasuerus is furious. He said, who would dare to kill, my wife? And she says, that man, the wicked Haman. And now you should all have noisemakers. She says, that man, the wicked Haman. Well, Ahasuerus loses it. He's very upset and he runs out of the room. So now here's the part that the kids always miss in Sunday school. And most of you have probably missed it as adults too. So here I am, the Hugh Hefner of Bible scholarship or something. Just to fill in what really happens in that story. Well, that seems a little strong, Hugh Hefner. Well, somebody like that. He says, Haman is there and he's terrified. And he starts pleading with Esther to intercede for him and forgive him. And as he does this, it says, he throws himself down beside her. Now you've got to remember where they are. They are in Esther's room. And it says he throws himself down beside her on the bed. And just then is when Ahasuerus, her husband, comes back in. And he sees Haman lying on the bed next to his wife. And he says, will he even approach my wife in my own house? Don't we have any gallows to hang this guy on? And they said, yeah, he has some right outside there that he made for Mordecai. So, okay, and they hang him immediately. Which means the Jews get saved because of a mistake. It was a misunderstanding. Haman wasn't putting the moves on Esther. He was pleading with Esther to forgive him, but he happened to pick a bad location to do that. So he might be guilty of stupidity or bad judgment. And Ahasuerus is guilty of misunderstanding and not. I learned from my mother, you always ask before you hit. But no, not Ahasuerus. His mom didn't teach. When you're the king of the world, you can kind of make exceptions to those rules. And so he says, what should we do? And they hang Haman instead. And then this date rolls around, the 15th of Adar, when all the Jews can be killed. People can kill Jews at will anywhere in the Persian Empire, and the king can't take back his edict, so he changes the edict to make it that the Jews are allowed to defend themselves, and in fact, they end up killing a lot of their enemies that day. And Esther goes to Ahasuerus, and she says, by the way, it was very nice of you to hang Haman for me, but I was just wondering, could you also hang his 10 sons? He says, yeah, okay, and he does. That's the part that always gave me the hardest time in this. It's not quite clear that they did anything. And I understand the politics of that, where if you're the children or the family of the losing side, you're in trouble. But I feel kind of bad, but what can I say? They're going to now. And so the Jews are saved, and there's great celebration, and they have a party. And it becomes a Jewish holiday ever after, with masks and noisemakers, and you read the book, and you dance around the synagogue, and drinking. You're allowed to get drunk on Purim, but then you look back on this and you say, this was just an awful story. I mean, it's fun, but I think that English rabbi taught it to us correctly when he said, gentlemen, this is a very dirty book. That she gets to be queen by winning a sex contest with the king, replacing a woman who did nothing but be a feminist with a small f, not a capital F. I mean, she was just saying she wasn't going to come. And a man trying to commit genocide on the Jews, and the Jews being saved not by God splitting the Red Sea, but by turning to a woman who does her best for them, but even then it only works out because the enemy makes a dumb mistake and her husband makes a dumb misunderstanding of his dumb mistake. So the Jews get saved by chance, where the fate of all the Jews in the world was like hanging by this thread, and just fortunately the thread swung a little that way, not that way, and that's what saves us. And so you understand why he would say that this is, let's say at minimum, a very difficult story. So when we came to the end of it, I remember the day that English rabbi was giving us his opinions about the story. And at the end, so he said, so what's the lesson? What's the prime lesson of the book of Esther? And he said, gentlemen, this is Gullus, or in the Hebrew that we use now, galut, or in English, galut translates either as diaspora or exile, depending on your point of view of where we are. He says, this is life outside of Israel. When this was in the period where Jews are first tossed out of their country, they're living under the Babylonians and now are living under the Persians, and you have no control over your own fate when you're living in somebody else's country. And he said, this is galut. What you see happening in that book, even if it turns out to be not history, just a story, that can happen. And he said, and now this really does get into calendar and it's wonderful. He says, the perfect thing is it happens on the 15th of Adar, right? The 15th of a lunar month, right, is full moon, right? So it happens on the full moon of Adar. And at the next full moon, the 15th of Nisan, is Passover, the holiday that celebrates going out of exile, out of Galut, and into the land of Israel. That is cool. I'm sorry, that is, so the amazing thing is that you can learn lessons from all kinds of things, either from a point in the story, or in this case, the implication of the story, which is that's the life of the Jews when they're thrown out of their land. Or in this case, not even that, but just the chance, maybe not chance, of the calendar of how, from one full moon to the next, we read the risks of living outside of our own land and the consequent joy of going back into it. Even in our very difficult times, you look at this story of who's vulnerable. Aliens in any country are vulnerable. And we Jews know a lot about that.